I just want to say from France, I just want to say that I tried to refer, not specifically to that question, but I think it's the same issue when I mentioned the need to integrate the macroeconomic dimensions of development.
Thank you. More thought. I knew that you were going to come in on this one, John. That side of the room, Jonathan.
Can I, or?
Oh, sorry, you can go, Jan, you can go ahead too, and then we can move on to John. Sorry, I didn't see you. I didn't see you, sorry.
Wait until
go
mic
ahead.
passes.
Go ahead,
I think
yeah.
the ambassador raises a very important issue on the policy coherence for development. But I also think that he's right in pointing to the fact that there are other political players, other departments that will look for their interests being served. And there I think we shouldn't take our wishes for reality. I think we need to be politically savvy and try to understand and see and assess where there is alignment of interests and where the interests and the incentives are such that we can benefit from other policy fields. And I think one area where it was very clearly illustrated is the forest law enforcement governance and trade agenda, the FLEGT. I think a very powerful case was made by Sue Unsworth on how to link different policy areas. I think that, and that's my plea that I did it this morning as well, that we stand to benefit from coming back to planet Earth and the realities on the ground, be country-specific, sector-specific, learn more about the politics, the incentives and the institutions in place, rather than take our wishes for granted.
Thank you, Jan. I think it's Johnny now, and then Alistair, and then we'll move on to something else. But can I ask you to be a bit more daring and explicit? We are asking whether to achieve policy coherence, is our development actors and ministers with the development portfolios, the 8 portfolio, the one best place to make it work, or do we need other champions to go ahead?
So, excuse me, Jonathan Glennie from Ipsos. So I've got a couple of thoughts, I guess. With regard to the relationship between aid and other policies like trade and all that stuff, I couldn't agree more, in the sense that I think a lot of, especially in Britain, a lot of the sector has to get over the fact that they are all related, always have been. The rest of the world sees them as related. We are, especially in the NGO sector, feels it's very heretical to start talking about aid and trade. In the Netherlands, it's the same minister. I think that's kind of fine. Talk about national interest, talk about strategic interest. We have to make the case to Britain and all of that. So in a sense, yes, join up the agendas. But there's the specific thing about aid or South-South cooperation or other forms of international public finance is that it is public. It is taxpayers' money fundamentally. And I think the role of this group ultimately should be about regulating or improving and monitoring and reviewing the use of taxpayers' money to be as effective as possible in promoting development, human rights and the SDGs. And the more that we expand so-called the agenda and invite everyone else around the table, couldn't be more happy to have those discussions, but this is a specific role to make sure that there is value for money for taxpayers' money.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. Alistair, and then we'll move on to a last question before we close.
I think it's not just about trade, it's also about other issues such as taxation and capital flight, because the actual loss to countries may be much greater than the aid flows. And there may be areas of mutual interest between the donor countries and the development partners in finding solutions to these problems that could actually magnify the impact of aid and make it less vital to their development.
Okay, thank you. Actually, this is a good segue to the last topic I would like to take up today. So I first need to answer this, and then... Okay.
You have one.
Okay, I think he's up. Yeah. So let's move to the last very topical question about technicalities versus politics. But can I say that I think Johnny said something quite important, that we all agree that there are all these important policy areas that need to be linked in, but how do we make sure that we do not continue to have a conversation that is about aid and development in isolation from those, and how do we bring the policy actors as well as the public along to a conversation that is not about aid alone or aid per se? So that's something, food for thoughts for the next few weeks. So finally, it's been touched upon, we heard Helder commenting on it, bringing the politicians along, but what else to make sure that this is not a conversation amongst technocrats, which I think in the aid world is a tendency, and actually has true political potential, particularly because a number of you are actually saying in different ways that you are a bit concerned that this is a little bit on a downward spiral when it comes to the political space. So to keep the political relevance, how do we achieve that? Ambassador, I think it's you again first on this agenda, and then we'll move on to others.
Well, I guess this is my reward. If I ask the question, I have to answer it myself. I've given already an indication in the sense that I think that we need to refocus ODA on and the role of ODA in the SDG framework, because it's still a bit sketchy in the sense that, for example, if you talk about leave no one behind as a principle, some talk about persons, groups, others talk about nations, countries. Helder talks about fragile and conflict-affected countries, but there are also groups who talk about middle-income countries where there are large numbers of poor people, and that there is a need for focusing ODA on those countries. So there is a large demand for ODA, and I think the demand fairly surpasses the supply. So we need to be more specific on where best we can position the ODA. And I think that also ties in with the debate in provider countries. What is the use of ODA? What is the use of development aid? And is development aid usefully spent? So I think that would be a way to move forward. And maybe we need to find another word for effectiveness, because effectiveness is technocratic. It's not very sexy. So what is the political translation of effectiveness?
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, from an organization that has to reconcile a lot of different politics internally, how do you make sure this does not fall down the technocratic alleyway?
I'm actually a technocrat myself, so it's a bit difficult to bring it to political. I think it's not only the European Union, European Commission who has to be active on that, because we have our 28 member states who have a very vocal, a very active role at the GBDEC.
Thank you. Romilly, some final thoughts on the...
Terrible kind of style answer, but I do think that there is still a bit of a missing evidence base here. And I remember, again, to go back to my history, I was an aid effectiveness advisor in DFID about 7-8 years ago, and the minister kept saying, how is this agenda going to help me demonstrate that I'm fighting poverty? And Jen tells me that the minister is still saying, to the extent that they're asking, tell me how this is going to help me leave no one behind and let people out of poverty. So, I do think you need the political narrative, but you need the backing for that and the evidence for that. And so I think there is still an agenda to be had to really, really demonstrate how this helps and how it leads to the progress. And maybe let's not talk about effectiveness, let's talk about, smart aid or value for money or, whatever the term we can come up with. But I think the evidence base is a really critical part of that. Sorry, that's maybe a slightly researcher kind of answer.
That's fine, but then we move to more of a politician or somebody who's been inside a number of political processes. Okay, maybe the evidence, what else to get those politicians on board, not just to come along, but to be on board and to remain committed when they come back? And how do they then sell it to their fellow politicians in government?
Let me share with you all. I used to work with the Aid Effectiveness Directorate in my home country with the Minister of Finance. And sometimes people ask me sarcastically, and even the politicians, hey, Helder, you've been traveling to different meetings, and how effective is the aid in other countries, including our country? How am I going to answer that? And I said, well, my answer to that is, Minister, it's also in your hand, because you're the one who makes decisions in our country level, in order to make it effective. So the question here is that whatever we do, that technocrats do at the technical level, but at the end of the day, it goes back to the political masses to decide. So that's why the combination between the political and the technocratic matters a lot. But from my perspective, looking at the country's perspective, and I'm sure that I have also other colleagues here from other countries as well, they can provide testimony for that. For us, as long as our development partners honor the commitments at the global level and then translate this at the country level with your actual commitments and are willing to take the risk, then we can talk about development effectiveness in real sense. Otherwise, it's just a talk show. Sorry for being very blunt and very straight to the point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And on that very sort of strong, tangible, and reality check from Helder, I thank all the participants of this final session. Please stay here at the table. There is no need to move. I'll just say a few words to conclude the conference. So thank you all for the very insightful, honest comments on this final session. So it is the honor, it falls on me, to conclude these 2 days of the CAPE 2016 conference and to thank all of you and all those that made this event possible. I think you will agree with me, and from the little bit I've seen in the last couple of hours, that we attempted to tackle, a political agenda, a highly technical question, something that can be, questions that sometimes are of interest, particularly for the aid community alone. But we've done it trying to get, a dynamic dialogue going. We made the most of technologies in different formats. I hope you liked, and we'd love to hear the feedback on what you felt about the way we tried to innovate a little bit the conversation the last 2 days, and make sure that by now you'll not all be, we'll have prevented death by PowerPoint and find you all lying on the floor with yet another list of bullet points. Having said all that, the conference is made of the participants and the speakers that joined us in the last couple of days. We heard from Minister Gondwe yesterday, and then the ambassadors and others who were members of the GPEDC steering committee and working inside the policy process, but also civil society representatives and thought leaders, think tank researchers, and international financial institutions, and of course the formidable ODI team, and I'll come back to all of you in a minute, who made the conference possible. I'm not going to go over the ground that we covered in the last couple of days, partly because we have just done so in this last session, but just as a reminder that we are committed, and Romilly in particular will take the lead in making the most of the wisdom that you shared with us in the last couple of days to capitalize what we've learned in the process towards the GPEDC forum and the process leading to it. I think it's been extraordinary. As usual, the CAPE conferences always are. They're an amazing effort by everybody involved, participants and organizers. So thank you all for taking part, but this is the moment also to think about the sort of DODI team. Romilly, Ed, and David, of course, will be in Nairobi and will take the work forward. Please remain in touch with us and with them in particular throughout, in the next few weeks, and then make that connection in Nairobi again so we can continue the conversation. On a little bit the work that ODI does, and we touched upon quite a bit in this last session, that I think we do need to be careful not to linger on development effectiveness almost as a sectoral, as a topic, but really make the most of it across the broader debate on development and human rights and global processes that John and others just referred to. So we do that at ODI within the work that we do at Economics and Finance, where we also do it as part of our work on climate change, as part of our work on security and fragility, and we will endeavor to continue to do that, particularly as the work, for example, that we do on Leave No One Behind, that again Romilly is central to, is really endeavors to take those principles of financing and build them in real policy agendas. So watch this space, not just for the work under the banner on development effectiveness, but across ODI's research and policy advisory work. A bit of news that probably most of you have picked up on social media, on the internet, or if not, over coffee in the last couple of days. It's an exciting time for ODI. We have a new executive director joining us soon in early 2017, yes. That's Alex Thier, that some of you know, of course, because Alex had a distinguished career in USAID and is an insider of policy processes, and we really hope that it will enhance our capacity to influence policy even more than we're already able to do right now. So coming to the formal final thank you for the last couple of days. First of all, to all of you, participants, the speakers, the facilitators, the panelists, and the speed geeks, architects, which is the bit that I really want to find out a bit more about. And in particular also to Rob, who made all the the technology innovation actually a reality, and for sort of running the show for 2 days, and with the support and the help and the contribution of our central communication team to make this event as interactive and as innovative as you've seen. To Good Enough College for being such a splendid venue for the event, and partner in this conference. And now to the ODI team. It's been a tour de force, as CAPE conferences always are, and they're always a little bit special. It's a very special moment in the year at ODI, and this probably has even surpassed previous attempts by being even more engaging and innovative. So there's been a long, many months of preparation and planning, briefing, calls, meetings, logistical challenges, and dramas, you will be pleased to know. I think colleagues can share a bit more about what these dramas are, and a Herculean final effort over the last few days. So, it's been tough, but it worked really well, and I'm really proud of all of you, and I thank you all for the effort that you have made. And in particular, the court team, of course, Romilly Greenhill, Catherine Blankpede, Sarah Parker, Julia Han, who made a pigeonhole possible, and it kind of works. I forgot to log out the last one, but I'm sure you have. Julia Teixeira, James Carlin, David Watson, and of course, Ed, who leads the team with the energy and the insights that Ed has. And to make these thanks a bit tangible, we do have a few presents for some of the people that I mentioned, and I think this is the moment where the presents can come forward. So Jem and Michaela, can you? This is a bit like the theatre, isn't it? It's like the soloist and a choir. Exactly. So while we hand over all these... So while we hand over our thank you to the wonderful team that's made this possible, this is a final opportunity to say thank you very much to all of you. We have, of course, recorded everything you've said, either video, audios. We've got wonderful comics. I'm sure we will have a Storyfy and more coming soon, and all of that will be available on the ODI website. So please do keep in touch, have a look, and any comment you've got either through Eventbrite or directly through Sarah will be much appreciated. So many thanks once again, and have a lovely evening. Thanks.
Thank you.